it says, dedicated to the memory of those who sacrificed their lives in the liberation struggle for the Tamil nation. My first reaction is, who has sacrificed the most? It's the ordinary Tamils of Sri Lanka. They are the ones who have suffered the most. At least 70,000, I think it is much more, have died since 1983. And then you ask yourself, this is a journalist, always asking questions to yourself and to others, but which is the one organization that has suffered the most, who has sacrificed the most in the pursuit of this Tamil nation? It is the LTTE. There's no other organization has sacrificed so many of their cadres as the LTTE has. So, as you know, the Sri Lankan politics is highly polarized, and the Tamil politics is also highly polarized. You're either pro-LTTE or you're anti-LTTE. So when it's written like this, my skepticism says, okay, so maybe this is a pro-LTTE book. So let me turn around and see how many references to Prabhakaran there is in this book. So I turn around to the index, and then guess how many references to Prabhakaran there is? One. There is one reference to Prabhakaran. So then I'm intrigued, and I said, okay, what is this one reference to Prabhakaran? And with your permission, can I quote that incident you mentioned in the book? It is right at the end of the book. Remember, this book starts from 300 BC and it goes down to 2080, and now we're in 2008. So it is the very last reference before he comes to his conclusion. And it is Dr. Gunasingam recounts an incident when he met with a very famous TULF leader, Shiva Chidambaram, who I knew very well, a very learned and distinguished man. So Dr. Gunasingam meets him in Madras, in Chennai, and asks him two questions. One, what do you think of Prabhakaran, given the fact that he was forced to live in exile in Chennai? He had to leave the Tamil areas and live in Chennai because of the LTT. They had threatened him, and so he had to live as an exile in Chennai. So his question was, what do you think of Prabhakaran? And the second question was, how long do you think it will take for the LTT to achieve their political goal of Tamilida? And Shiva Chidambaram, he quotes, is silent for a few minutes, and then with tears in his eyes, he recounts. He says, talking about Prabhakaran, he says, this is one Tamil leadership that nobody can buy. And then the second question, then he says, he adds on, and Shiva Chidambaram adds on, he says, till today, I have not raised my hat to anyone, but today I will raise it to Prabhakaran. And to the second question, how long will it take for the LTT to realize their goal of Tamil Eelam? Shiva Chidambaram does not answer, and you have left that question unanswered in the book. So we don't know. We don't know the answer, and perhaps when you get on the stage, you could explain to us, and maybe you could give us that little secret that you have withheld in this book, unless that is the subject of your next book. About Tamil Eelam, I think Tamil Eelam does exist already. It exists in the hearts and minds of every single Tamil expatriate. So it is a reality. Tamil identity is strong. Tamil nationhood is strong. No one can take that away from you. But the question is, what is it that you can give back to this identity? Not everyone can be an LTT person sacrificing their life. It's not possible for you. In a lot of countries, the LTT is even proscribed, so they can't even do that. It's not even necessary. What can you, as citizens of Norway or other countries, what can you do? What can you give back to the Tamil identity, the Tamil nationhood? It is your excellence. Whatever you do, whatever branch, whatever field you are in, it is to bring that quality of excellence into that field. It is to bring professionalism. It is to bring scholarship, as this book has done. That is your greatest contribution. As the Jews, for instance, who were extraordinarily accomplished in different fields, in whichever countries they were, whether it was arts, science, music, medicine, whatever it is, they were the ones who were excelling in that. The tragedy of Sri Lanka has been that the tragedy of the Tamils in Sri Lanka has been that since 1983, a large number of Tamils had to leave Sri Lanka because it was so unsafe to be a Tamil in Sri Lanka. So they had to leave their country. So there is today a missing generation, a lost generation, my generation. They were all in their 20s when they left, probably. People who are now in their 50s and 60s. For them, it was a matter of survival. They were running. It was a question of saving their lives, saving their families. But today, their children are growing up in stable, open democracies in Norway, in UK, in United States, in Australia, and other parts of Europe. These children are leading a much more secure life than their parents or their grandparents did. And they have valuable tools with them. They are enrolled in good universities. They can bring this quality of excellence. Time has come for this generation to rise and show what they're capable of, what history has shown what the Tamils are capable of. And here Dr. Gunasinghe makes a couple of references here that unfortunately the Tamils have not paid enough attention to historical research. The Sinhalese have. They have spent a lot of time and effort doing this, and they also have a lot of funding to do this. The Tamils have not been able to do this for a variety of reasons. First of all, in a conflict situation, you do not have the luxury to indulge in research and history. You're trying to survive. Secondly, there is another aspect that perhaps the Tamils are more interested in things like medicine and engineering and do not attach enough prestige and value to things like social sciences, humanities, history. What I would like to say to you is, if your children want to do history and subjects like humanities, please encourage them. Because as this book shows, there is a whole area of research regarding the Sri Lankan Tamil history that is begging for research. Dr. Gunasinghe himself had to travel all over the place. He had to go to United States, he had to go to UK, he had to go to Netherlands, he had to go to Portugal, he had to go to India to do the research for this book. But today the Tamil diaspora is in all these countries. And it is a much needed requirement today as part of what you can give back to your nationhood, to your identity, to encourage children to get into these disciplines. Today you have invaluable tools to conduct research. Encourage them to do this because as Dr. Gunasinghe says in this book, history is our godmother at birth. I would like to conclude by making a small reference to something that Prabhakaran said in his very first interview, which, as you mentioned, was to me in 1984, almost a quarter of a century ago. And I asked him a question. It was the very first interview, so of course I had a whole lot of questions to ask about Jayavardhane, about the conflict, about history, about the armed struggle, about the democratic struggle, so on and so forth. All kinds of questions were asked. And then I asked him one question, the answer to which I still remember a quarter of a century later. I have interviewed a whole number of presidents and prime ministers. I don't remember a single thing that any one of them said. But this is one thing that I cannot forget. And to think, before I tell you what it is, just to think that Prabhakaran was only 29 years old when he said this. After asking all these questions, I suddenly popped this question. Who is your friend, philosopher, and guide? Came the answer. Nature is my friend. Remember, the LTT is a guerrilla organization that uses the natural terrain to conduct its warfare. So the natural terrain is your best ally when it comes to running away from the forces, is your best ally when it comes to surprise, ambush, taking on your enemy. He said, nature is my friend. Life is my philosopher. And who is his guide? History is my guide. If I say that Prabhakaran is the person that I have met in my life who has the greatest sense of foresight, I would say it is because of his deep understanding of history. It is that deep understanding of history of the past that enables him to have this clear vision into the future. And so I would like to conclude by saying that may history be the guide to take the Tamils of Sri Lanka to their rightful destiny so that they can live in peace, in freedom, in dignity, and above all, in honor. Thank you.